Okay, Giant team members, in this video lecture we're going to talk about the use of language in communication. And it's probably something, until I said it, something you don't give much thought to, or most people don't give much thought to, because we get up in the morning and we're maybe speaking to our significant other or a pet, and on our way to work we might carpool and we're talking, and once we're at work we're talking, and as we're talking we're using language. And we don't think too much about it, but language really, everything that we utter through language has the potential, and often does, create a new reality of something that really didn't exist before or wasn't thought about in a certain context before. So as we're using our words, in essence we're creating a new reality, and this is, this is social exchange theory, and this is dialogue theory, and we need to be thinking about it that way. I could say to one of my friends, "Well, I don't want to go to that bar anymore because the drinks are so expensive and it's really not worth it," because I'm creating a new reality just with those few words, that this place isn't worth the time or money. We don't want to go there anymore. I don't want to go there anymore. So, it's creating new visuals, and it's creating a new social aspect and a new social reality. So language really does matter, because communication through language involves the creation and the exchange of meaning. And your book does a good job of talking about this, because we could say something like, if you hear something like "sit down," it signals a higher status of somebody. And perhaps it's indicating anger, or some kind of frustration with somebody, right? Just the word "sit down," but the meaning that it conveys is very important. I would be pleased if you would sit down. That's completely different. Signals respect, or maybe even sarcasm, depending on the tone and the situation or the context of the thing. "You must be so tired. Why don't you sit down?" That signals concern or closeness for the person, or some other form of condolence. So, the meaning, everything that goes along with communication, not just the words or the information, but it's the language that we use. It's the manners in which we use that language conveys meaning. So it's very important that we're aware of the language, and then when and where, the timing of when we're using that language. The language managers use in a change situation creates meaning for others regarding what is going on, right? The sensitivity of the issues. Am I going to lose my job? Am I not going to be up for promotion now? What, the sensitivities of the issue, certain things, and then possibly confusion. Boy, that's not what my manager said yesterday. He said something completely different. So that's going. Those situations are we're trying to convey what's going on. But we want to do it in a very straightforward manner. Change is shared in both planned and unplanned meetings and conversations. And we talked about some of those unplanned conversations where a lot of information can be conveyed in those. So we should encourage those, but make sure the right information is being conveyed. And change managers need to be skilled in the use of appropriate language and create shared language of change. There's a lot of change management projects that fail because there's not a shared language of change, and people they might be on the same page, but they're using kind of different languages, different terminologies that have different meanings to different people, maybe across functional areas. So it could get very confusing. So change managers need to use appropriate language and understand what that shared language of the organization is. We said this before, I think I said this in the introduction, the management of change is really the management of communication. Communication is change. Change happens within that communication process. So it's hard to separate change and communication. So that's how important it is. I'm going to attach an article to this week because there's a lot written in your textbook about this article by Ford and Ford, the role of conversations in producing intentional change in organization. I believe this is from 1999 or 1995. And again, there's a lot in your book that talks about this, but this is a really good article. I recommend reading through this a couple times to get the meaning of this article and the gist, because it really does talk about the importance of language and how language has a profound impact on the change project. And it like a lot of other things, it can come in stages too. It's different languages at different stages within the change process are going to be important. And change takes place through 4 types of conversations. We'll talk about those conversations. The first one is the initiative conversation. And that's just what it sounds like, right? That initial or initiative conversation draws attention to the need for change, whether it's reactive change or it's proactive change. Reactive meaning something's happening and we need to change. We will have those initiative conversations. Or is it proactive? We're going to get ahead of the curve. We're going to introduce something new. Again, those are initiative conversations. Those initiative conversations are usually, not usually, always supported by evidence, right? There's a reason, true and false, good or bad, there's a reason that we're initiating this change. And it's a fundamental unit of exchange in management structures, meaning that, you know, there's fundamental judgments, exchanges, coordinations that go on in an organization. Those initiative conversations are kind of a fundamental unit of exchange in management saying, here's what needs to be done, here's what's going on, here's the evidence to support that, and if something doesn't go right, you know, an initiative isn't going right, or an employee does something, or an excuse for not getting something done, again, that exchange is in need of evidence and support for why something was or wasn't done. You're going to see within this initiative conversation, and I think Ford and Ford outline more than 3. I think they outline 5 or 6, but your book only looks at 3. They call it the assertion, what needs to be achieved, the request, which is an attempt to make the listener do something, includes maybe invitations, instructions, orders, or commands, and then the listener can either respond or the listener will not respond to whatever those maybe commands or initiatives are. And then there could be declarations too, and a declaration they liken to a judge or an umpire. You know, an umpire will call a strike or a ball, and that's kind of the final decision, and that's a declaration. The judge will say you're innocent or you're guilty. That's a declaration. It's the same way with maybe a top-down management approach where this is what's going to be done, or this person's going to be promoted or not promoted. Those are declarations. So all of those happen within this initiative conversation. Then the other 3 that we have, for a total of 4, we have conversations for understanding, conversations on performance, and conversations on closure. So again, think as you're going through a change or getting ready even for a change process, there are these 4 separate conversations that need to happen along the way through each of these stations. Conversations for understanding help others understand the need for change. And there's 3 ways to do that. Specify the conditions of satisfaction, kind of outlining here's what exactly needs to be done. Enable the involvement of those who are going to be impacted or affected, and enable shared meaning and understanding. Again, that goes back to a previous slide too. It's important that we have that shared meaning and understanding. We all need to be on the same page. We can't have different people using different language with different meaning and expecting everybody to be on the same page, especially cross-functionally. So those conversations for understanding need to happen. Check that off. Conversations on performance. Focus on producing the change. Promises are made. Obligations are entered into. Accountabilities are established. And deadlines are set. Right? Those conversations, everything associated with it, all those conversations need to happen. And then there's conversations on closure, where we acknowledge and we celebrate and reward for the completion of our change project, and we move people to new project or new initiatives. But there are breakdowns that can occur in these change conversations, and those are listed on page 224 of your textbook. Initiative conversations are held with people who are not in a position to proceed with change. There's a lack of shared understanding or shared vision about the intended changes. There is shared understanding, but performance conversations do not take place. You need to have those performance conversations. What are the expectations and the accountabilities in terms of performance? Requests for action and performance are not rigorous and fail to specify intentions regarding results and deadlines. Closure conversations do not take place, and people feel they are still involved with the change while being asked to move on to new initiatives. So you have to kind of close the door on these so people know that's it, it's over. We'll have those conversations so that when you move on, you're not still submerged in this other change initiative. And then we also want to align language with change. This is Marshak in 1993. So there's a couple different, we would call them metaphors or different methods or ways of aligning that with change. You could use machinery imagery. Portrays the organization as broken and needing to be fixed, right? That's kind of the machinery imagery, or kind of a metaphor that, look, this machine of our organization is broken. We need to do something in order to fix it. Developmental imagery emphasizes the need to improve, building on the past and current practices. And this is where that coach perspective comes in the most handy. Terms such as nurturing, growing, and getting better are aligned with these types of changes. There's transitional imagery, kind of a move and relocate. Emphasizes making changes by building on what exists. So we're going to move and we're going to relocate. We're going to go into something else. We're going to transition into something else. Say online sales, when Walmart, who's a very traditional brick and mortar organization, decided to move to online. That's kind of that transitional imagery. We're going to move to online sales. Maybe not the entire thing, obviously, but a lot of it is going to move online. That move and relocate. And then there's transformational imagery. Liberate and recreate. Emphasizes really radical change. Reinvention, recreation, adoption of a new paradigm are all aligned with this kind of change. So, you can go from we're broken, things need to be fixed, to we are going to completely transform. We are going to liberate and recreate this organization. Certainly a lot of organization has done over the time. Some last bits and points from this chapter. The shared language. We're talking about sharing meanings and concepts to avoid confusion and conflict. So whatever that shared language is, and again, I always defer back to that second class that we had, where we talked about cognitive dissonance and self-efficacy and the RAS and vivid imagery. And after taking that class, we were all on the same page. We can get together, we can have a conversation about improving the mental health of the employees in our organization, and we would be using that shared language where people wouldn't be confused. We're using self-talk. People know what self-talk is at that. Now, somebody else might be saying inner speech or inner dialogue, and maybe that's a little different. Maybe that's not the shared language that we all came up on or we all learned about. So that could cause some confusion and or conflict. So we want to make sure that we have shared language. Be aware that surface level language differences may be a sign that there are some fundamental differences in beliefs and assumptions among those that are involved. So it's a sign. If there's differences, it's a sign that there could be some differences. We talked about assumptions and beliefs and values. There could be some differences with people. And when that happens, you usually have people talking past each other rather than to each other. So I have a different set of beliefs and values, and I'm talking kind of past you, not really too concerned that there's differences in the way you might be encoding something. So that's not a good form of communication. We're talking past each other. We want to make sure that we're talking to each other and everybody is on the same page. Okay, so that's our video lecture on language and meaning and why those things are so important in the change process and making sure all the employees involved are on the same page.